All right, everybody. So thank you all so much for joining us today. Today we're talking all about conflict. So I'm not working with them. Often that's a response to conflict, and it's just something that we don't want to do. But what we're going to do today is encourage you to deal with that conflict head on. And I'm going to give you 5 steps, 5 magical steps to deal with any conflict that you have. Before we jump in, just a little bit about me so you know why I'm qualified to give you this advice. Some resume virtues, some things about me. My name is Michaela Bean. I'm a student conduct officer here on campus. I also just this morning received an email and have officially become a certified Clifton Strengths coach. I have, in addition to my conduct experience, a lot of experience with new student orientation, as well as just working with student organizations. So with my previous experience, and especially in my current role, I deal with conflict almost every day. Conflict between 2 people, conflict between an individual and the university, all sorts of conflict. But I also want to mention some eulogy virtues. So these are things that if I were to be gone tomorrow, things that I just want people to remember about me. And I think that they also tie into why I'm giving this presentation for you and holding this seminar about conflict management. So I'm dedicated to developing people. That is directly related to me becoming a strengths coach. I think everyone can be a little bit better. I'm empathetic because I believe everyone deserves to make a mistake. And I also really, really value integrity. So all of this is connected to conflict, because conflict for the sake of conflict is a waste of everyone's time. But if we can utilize conflict to make progress, then it is worthwhile. I'm going to encourage all of you to also be empathetic when you're dealing with conflict, because people deserve to make mistakes. You deserve to make a mistake. The students you're working with, your peers, whoever it is, you deserve to make a mistake. And what's important is how we move forward from that mistake. Okay. And finally, I encourage you all to also live with integrity, because when it comes down to conflict, and we're going to really get into this, but if you're going to resolve a conflict, you need to do the things you say you're going to do. Okay. So just an overview, some of what we're going to do today is we're going to explore communication styles. We are going to explore and discuss conflict. We'll talk about leadership a little bit. Why is this important? Some of you may be attending as part of Spring into Leadership for student involvement. Some of you are attending for the Cisneros Institute. So we're all here to learn a little bit something about leadership. We're also going to learn something about ourselves, hopefully, and how we naturally manage conflict. And then finally, I'm going to give you those 5 magical steps. To kick us off, I want to start with an activity. So those of us who are joining live, I'm going to ask you to do something. If you are watching this recording, just go ahead and play along yourself, maybe write some things down on a piece of paper. So for those of you watching live, I want you to, at the top of your screen, you should have a green bar that says, oh, you're viewing Michaela Bean's screen, and locate the annotate tool. With the annotate tool, I want you to choose the text tool, because it'll be the easiest, and go ahead and annotate all over my screen. What do you think of when you hear these 3 words? Communication, civility, and conflict. Go ahead and annotate that for me. Put your own thoughts about that up.
Do you want us to put that in the chat?
So if you go to the top of your screen, there should be a bar that says you are viewing Michaela Bean's screen. And if you hover over that, you'll get a toolbar. If you click the annotate tool, it's a little pencil. Then it gives you other options.
Is it view options?
It shouldn't be view options. It should be annotate.
Annotate. Let's see.
And if you're not seeing it, go ahead and put it in the chat, and I can, maybe throw that over for you as well.
Okay, for sure. Thank you.
So for communication so far, we have relaying and receiving messages, civility, being nice, having respect, and treating others with kindness. Whoops, my bad. For conflict, we have arguing, being open-minded, conflict a problem, anything else. And if you have time, you can put up more than one. Okay, I'm gonna go ahead and stop letting you annotate. But thank you for taking the time with me to do that. All really great things that you all said. So, according to my good friend Merriam-Webster, civility is the act of showing regard for others by being polite. It can also mean formal politeness. So I like how you all also included words like understanding, and that for you, civility didn't just mean, being nice. In addition to that, civil discourse is engagement in conversation intended to enhance understanding. So just looking at those two words, I want you to just consider for yourself which one is more important and which one is going to get you farther when we're thinking in terms of communication and conflict. And finally, just think for a moment, can we have civil discourse without civility? Another few definitions I want to cover are in terms of communication and specifically conversations. So this book that I am utilizing, I'm going to show you, it's called Crucial Conversations, Tools for Talking When Stakes Are High. According to this book and its author, casual conversations happen every day. It's, talking to somebody about what they're having for lunch. It's just, some of our passing conversations, some of that civil conversation, right? Just chatting for the sake of chatting, to be nice, what have you, just normal conversation. But casual conversations can become crucial. And a crucial conversation, that occurs when stakes are high, opinions vary, and emotions run strong. So when I say crucial conversation and I read that definition, or you read it yourself, those of you who are here with me, you can unmute or you can throw it in the chat. What does that make you think of?
It kind of makes me think of like having that talk with somebody, because I'm work full time at a warehouse at the and I've been working there for 2 years, so I'm one of the trainees, and I'm trying to figure out how to have a conversation like with somebody in my department, like one of the new hires, like, hey, you're a really good worker, you're a really hard worker. I like how you work, but maybe this department isn't for you. Maybe we can put you in another department where you'll succeed, and maybe a couple months you could come back here, and maybe you might get the hang of it later on. And I'm just wondering, how do you have that crucial conversation with somebody, and you kind of look at how do you respond to them if they respond with like, well, I could pick it up, but it's like you don't want to put the company in like a situation where they're like writing the person up because they're having poor performance, and then they kind of lose their job, and you're like, maybe I should have said something earlier and that would have prevented that. So I was just wondering, how do you have that conversation and then respond to that person when they for something like that?
Yeah, great thought. Great question. Yeah. So anytime you're dealing with someone's employment, automatically stakes are high, right? Like that's someone's livelihood. And then when you're talking about, potentially presenting the opportunity for them to move out of that place of employment, and not necessarily in a positive way, right? Not necessarily like, hey, let's give you a promotion. That's going to be an emotional time. Yeah, absolutely. And Bernadette says conversations that will result in consequences or feelings that could be major. Yes, absolutely. Yes. And no one said the word that I was thinking of, but when I see crucial conversations, and it's directly to this, entire hour that we're going to spend together, it's conflict, right? There is some sort of conflict happening, and it is crucial that we resolve that, right? So, like Antonio or Anthony said, you're dealing with a poor performance issue, and that's impacting the company as a whole, right? And for some of you who maybe are not in those positions of employment, it could be dealing just with your student organization. And if you don't have this conversation, things are going to continue going poorly, right? So we really need to address it. Absolutely. So really quickly, I want to give you all a little bit of a pop quiz. So if you've got some paper and a pen near you, grab it. If not, open something up on your computer that you can just type your responses in. I am going to read out 12 questions for you that are all about your style under stress. How do you naturally approach things, okay? There are no wrong answers, but there are only 2 answer choices. You're either going to respond true or false, okay? And this is a personal activity, so no need to put it in the chat or speak out about it. But let's go ahead and start this. So question 1. At times, I avoid situations that might bring me into contact with people I'm having problems with. 2, I have put off returning phone calls or emails because I simply didn't want to deal with the person who sent them. 3, sometimes when people bring up a touchy or awkward issue, I try to change the subject. 4, when it comes to dealing with awkward or stressful subjects, sometimes I hold back rather than give my full and candid opinion. 5, rather than tell people exactly what I think, sometimes I rely on jokes, sarcasm, or snide remarks to let them know I'm frustrated. 6, when I've got something tough to bring up, sometimes I offer weak or insincere compliments to soften the blow. 7, in order to get my point across, I sometimes exaggerate my side of the argument. 8, if I seem to be losing control of a conversation, I might cut people off or change the subject in order to bring it back to where I think it should be. 9, when others make points that seem stupid to me, I sometimes let them know it without holding back at all. 10, when I'm stunned by a comment, sometimes I say things that others might take as forceful or attacking. Comments such as, give me a break, or that's ridiculous. 11, sometimes when things get heated, I move from arguing against others' points to saying things that might hurt them personally. 12, if I get into a heated discussion, I've been known to be tough on the other person. In fact, the person might feel a bit insulted or hurt. So go ahead and take a look at your responses, and specifically at the questions you responded true for. For questions 1 through 6, these behaviors are naturally more passive, right? Each of them dealt a little bit with, okay, there's this sense of conflict, this sense of stress, and the way I deal with it is kind of by avoiding it, not really actually addressing it, just removing myself from the situation, right? And if I don't remove myself from the situation, I just give whoever else is involved what they want instead of voicing my opinion. 7 through 12 are categorized as more aggressive, or some of them would be more direct tendencies, okay? So for these ones, if you responded true, you might find that under stress, you get a little bit defensive, and the way that you react to that feeling of being defensive is by lashing out at people, or like it said, snide remarks. Maybe instead of focusing on the real problem, you may turn to saying some hurtful things to try and get the other person to stop talking so that you'll have the opportunity. We all do this, okay? There are obviously some problems with both responses, right? People who are, just naturally more passive, maybe you may characterize them as being a bit of a doormat, like, we can just do whatever we want, they're not going to say anything. Whereas people that are more aggressive, you don't want to work with. I will own up that I'm in both categories, depending on the situation. So there's nothing wrong with it, but it's important for us to first recognize how we naturally react to stressful situations. Because if conflict is anything, it's stressful. Because again, going back to that definition, a crucial conversation, stakes are high.
How do you know how to keep that balance between passive and aggressive when you're dealing with that conflict?
Fantastic question. So we're going to get to that. It really comes down to how do you want to deal with the conflict, right? And I'll say this a little earlier than I normally would, but the very first thing that you always want to ask yourself before engaging in a conflict is, do you care about the outcome? Because if you don't care about the outcome, I would almost advise you to be passive, because why are you going to waste your energy if you don't care, right? But in general, these are just things more we want to manage. We don't want to lean on them. And it's important to notice it in yourself, because when you're noticing it in yourself, you can notice it in other people as well. And so we're going to get to this, but part of conflict management is redirecting when people are falling into these patterns, okay? Because if people are just being passive or just being aggressive, you're not talking about the issue, and you're not actually going to move forward and reach that compromise or that collaboration or whatever the outcome you want it to be is. Does that make sense for you, Anthony?
Yes. So what you're saying is that um it's like how do you, yeah, how do you deal with the conflict, and do you care about the outcome? Yeah.
Yeah.
It's like, yeah, if you do, then you want to be more passive than aggressive, and you don't want to turn that person off. Uh,
Right.
yeah.
Right. But again, it's if you're vested in it, if you have a vested interest, again, that is the very first part of it being a crucial conversation. If you have a vested interest, you care about the outcome. You don't want to be passive about that, right? All right. So moving forward, in addition to how we respond to high stress and reactions, we also want to talk about how we respond to conflict. There's really just two main responses to conflict. The first is where we naturally fall into for most of us, and it's judgment. It's an issue of judging others as well as judging self. So judging others might sound like, you're such a slob, I can't believe you. Judging self may sound like, I should have known better, right? I should have known better than to trust you to do this. So that's kind of where we naturally fall. But what I want us to redirect to is looking at conflict from a needs-based approach. And this is just generally going to be more productive. So we want to take into consideration other people's feelings and needs, as well as our own feelings and needs, okay? Because again, vested interest, you care about it. So what you want, need, feel are just as important as the other person. So Anthony, you were talking about a situation with employment. People need a job. People got to make money, right? So you need to understand what that other person's feelings are, but you have a responsibility for your company to ensure you're meeting, goals, targets, deadlines, safety measures, whatever the case may be. And so you need to take both of those things into consideration and express both of those things. So an example I have to kind of demonstrate this is, you go home for a weekend, you go on vacation for a weekend, and your roommate, your spouse, whomever maybe you're living with is left at home, and you come home to this. Now, maybe some of you don't feel this way, but for most people, if you come home from vacation to a huge mess, especially one that you didn't leave behind, that's stressful, annoying, irritating, any of those kind of negative emotions, right? Naturally would probably approach this from that judgment place of, again, oh my God, they're such a slob. I cannot believe that you left the kitchen like this. I cannot believe you didn't clean up after yourself. This is a common space. That area of judging self, again, I should have known better. And I also like to throw out the example of my partner is terrible at laundry, and I know that. We've been together for 8 years. I know they are terrible at laundry, but inevitably I still ask them to do my laundry sometimes. And I will come home and maybe it's clean, but it's not folded and put away. And immediately I'm like, I don't know why I expected anything different, right? If we can approach this differently though, and think about others' feelings and needs and self feelings and needs. Coming home to something like this, something you may consider is why it happened, especially like if we're looking at a mess this big, it doesn't happen in one fell swoop, right? That is kind of for a few days there, maybe that they were not cleaning up after themselves, not doing the dishes. So considering others' feelings and needs. Sometimes if we think about, mental health, that can lead to a situation like this, as well as, most of you all are not just students, you're your parents, your employees, and so time can be running really shortly. And just in general, if you walk into a kitchen, you don't know any of that context. So one of the best things you could do is ask, right? But before you get to a place of ask, you also want to examine your own feelings and needs. Hey, the kitchen's kind of a mess. So you want to start by stating a fact, right? That's an observable fact. No one can question that. So Anthony, I don't know what the situation is, but maybe it's, hey, so we've noticed that your output isn't quite the same as everyone else's. Just a fact, something that you can back up with some evidence. When I walk into this kitchen, it makes me feel really anxious. It's really frustrating because I know that I left the kitchen clean. And then you want to state your needs, right? I really need a clean environment when I come home because it helps me be more productive and jump right into my schoolwork or whatever I need to do. When I have to first do this, it again makes me anxious, really stresses me out, and I spend a lot of unneeded energy on it. So again, the example with the employment. We really need to be hitting these metrics on these given days. And when we don't, I'm getting my behind torn up by my supervisors. So we really need to deal with that situation. Again, taking into consideration someone else's feelings and needs, not being rude about it, but being direct and laying all of that out. So rule number 1, think about, do I have a vested interest in this? If I don't, why am I spending my energy on it? And rule number 2, we really want to work to come from a place of needs, feelings and needs, not judgment. And then we're going to get to actually resolving the conflict, okay? So like Michael Scott said, we're looking for a win-win-win situation, right? Something where we can have an outcome that doesn't just benefit one party, but that everyone can feel good about. So there's 5 kind of conflict resolution takes. The first is avoidance, which again, this is coming down to that, if you don't care, why are you dealing with it? That's going to be an appropriate time to utilize avoidance. Most of the time, avoidance isn't going to get you anywhere, right? It's not dealing with the problem. Some other times when avoidance would be appropriate or acceptable would be when maybe you don't have the mental or physical capacity for it right now. So I'm thinking, things like the roommate disagreement or, the dishes, maybe not so much a workplace thing, because with workplace, the stakes are maybe a bit more high. But if you don't have the space to do it right now, let's avoid it for the time being. But eventually you are going to need to come back if you want to resolve the issue, right? The second, excuse me, is competition. Competition is very me first. It's a need to win or a need to be right. It's going into something with, these are all of my cards and I need to win all of them. You're kind of entering a place of not being open to those last two of compromise and collaboration. You're needing to get everything you want out of it. You're not really willing to give anything up. You may argue that there are sometimes places where competition is valuable. I think they can come into play a little bit more in a workplace when you really kind of have that bottom line and there are non-negotiables. But I would encourage you to stray away from that a little bit, and we'll get to in the tips some things to consider, like those non-negotiables and how we can still manage those. The third is accommodation. So the opposite of competition. It's a little bit like avoidance. It's, at the end of the day, you forego your agenda and give whoever you're dealing with what they want. It can be productive, and perhaps that comes from a lengthy conversation where they throw some things at you that you hadn't considered before, and you're able to kind of just resolve yourself to saying, okay, I apologize. I've laid out how I feel, what my needs are, and now I understand that what you've proposed is going to do those things. So you can kind of resolve yourself to going with what the other person wanted or the other party, okay? Compromise and collaboration is really what we want to be aiming for most of the time with conflict, because they're both much more focused on reaching a place where everyone can leave with what they were hoping for, at least in some regard. So compromise, it's all about negotiating, agreeing on a common ground. Maybe everybody has to give and take a little bit in order to reach this. And then collaboration is where you aim to meet the needs of all parties. For collaboration to really work, listening is going to be key, okay? For conflict management as a whole, listening is key. You want to listen to understand, not to respond, okay? Because if you're not listening to understand, you might miss those areas like I was talking about in accommodation where, oh, I hadn't considered that. That is a really great idea that we can utilize in this situation. A pretty low stakes example of collaboration that I have is at the start of the year, my partner and I moved in with some roommates. In addition to him not being great at laundry, both of us really hate doing dishes, but we really love cooking. So that's already a natural conflict. Our roommates, on the other hand, not the best cooks, but find doing dishes like relaxing, which I can't understand. But so we've kind of reached this collaboration where my partner and I do like 90% of the cooking and our roommates do the dishes. So again, you're able to reach a collaboration of, we need to eat. You really appreciate a cleaner space than maybe what we need. And here's how we're gonna reach that together. So you always want to consider which of these ways is going to actually get us where you want to go, right? This is going to bring us to our 5 steps of crucial conversations, or 5 steps of conflict management, okay? Step 1, get to the heart of it. What is the real conflict? This is that needs-based versus judgment-based, okay? Get rid of the judgment and really think about, what are your needs? What are the needs of the other party? And where is that actual conflict happening? Is the conflict just that the dishes aren't done and that bothers you? Or is it deeper than that? Because if the dishes aren't done, if the room isn't clean, you can't focus on what you really need to do, right? Anthony, is the issue that he's just moving slower than you want him to? Or is it really affecting the bottom line? And if we can get to the heart of it and find that common ground of what is the actual problem, that's going to be step 1 from jumping off and being able to move forward. If you can't share what the actual problem is, already there's too much confusion and too much emotion, which again, crucial conversations, emotions are running high. The emotions are okay, but we need to keep in check how we're responding to those emotions, okay? And making sure we're not being passive, making sure we're not being aggressive, but that we're fully at the table and ready to conversate about it. Step 2, it's establish a common goal, okay? Can't say it enough. Crucial conversations happen when stakes are high. So everyone involved in the conflict should have a vested interest in what's happening. And what you need to do after you establish, okay, this is what the real conflict is, here's what resolving this conflict looks like. That's your common goal, okay? You may not reach it the exact way that you go into a conflict thinking you're going to reach it, but you all need to agree on what the common goal is. Is the common goal keeping the kitchen clean? Is the common goal, we want to keep you on board, but we want to find a different place for you? So really the common goal is keeping someone employed, keeping someone as part of your student organization. What is the common goal? Step 3 is discussing barriers. Okay, so this is about the non-negotiables. What can and cannot be changed? For the dishes example, maybe your roommate works 40 hours a week. And so sometimes it's just not doable for them to immediately wash their dishes because they gotta, eat, walk out the door, go to work, go to class, and they come home really late. Maybe that's non-negotiable. They can't quit their job, right? For employment, not exactly, Anthony, what you were talking about, but maybe you're having an issue where, I got to leave at 4 o'clock every day to pick up my kid. I cannot change that. If I'm not there, I'm getting fined. I'm getting this from the daycare. I have to leave at 4 p.m. to pick them up. What are those non-negotiables for both sides? And what's more negotiable? What can be changed? What really can be a part of this? Maybe reaching a compromise. If you have to leave at 4 o'clock, can you come in earlier? Is that a place that we can kind of start? Step 4 is the hardest. It's coming to an agreement. And I know these are 5 steps, but they're not necessarily linear. There's going to be times when maybe you got to get back to step 1 because emotions have gone a little too high, right? Maybe we're working on coming to an agreement and we get off track and we got to start back over from 1. But step 4 is coming to an agreement. How are we reaching this common goal we have? And what's really important are action steps. A lot of times with conflict, we get very caught up in the emotional side of it. We can get caught up in what I like to describe as the kumbaya of it, of, okay, we spent all this time talking about it. We all feel better because we expressed our emotions. And then when you really think about it, nothing actually changed, nothing actually happened. So establishing those action steps is vital. It's not enough to feel better about a situation after you've talked about it. You've got to know how it's actually going to change. And step 5 is to acknowledge the agreement. Restate the agreement, make sure everyone is on the same page. Restate the action steps, who those action steps belong to, right? I focused a lot on maybe 2-person conflicts, but sometimes, especially those of you who are in leadership positions in your organizations, you may be dealing with a lot more people than that. Anthony, with your workplace situation, you're likely dealing with far more people than just yourself and who you're supervising. There's probably some other guys ahead of you that are asking you to make these changes, right?
Yeah, the supervisors and area managers, but I mean, it's like a brand new warehouse. It's the TJ Maxx warehouse, so it's like a brand new still. So things are still kind of rolling until we get into that flow of things and stuff like that. Until we find that core group too, because people come and go, and I train them, and then I don't see them, and then they're just gone, and stuff like that. So I'm trying to okay, well, how do I keep them here, or besides just them wanting to be employed.
Yeah, absolutely, for sure. So again, multiple people involved. Who is responsible for what? That's another thing that often gets left behind. I can't tell you the number of meetings I leave where this is what we're going to do, but we never actually assign it to somebody. And we meet again the next week and we're like, okay, where are we at? And no one has a response because you didn't know who was taking care of what. And finally, part of acknowledging the agreement is establishing accountability. So if these action steps aren't followed, if these changes that need to be made for us to reach that common goal aren't happening, how do we revisit this conversation in a safe way, right? In a way that we all feel comfortable coming back together.
What was that last part about the meeting again? Who? How do we establish who's going to do what again?
Yeah, so the action steps. So it's not enough to have action steps. You got to say who's going to do what, right? So maybe this was a conflict that started between yourself and your supervisor because, hey, we're not reaching the goals we need to. And now the first action step is, Anthony, you got to have a meeting with this guy that's not performing well. And then maybe you have that conversation, and what you're proposing is to move the guy to a different area. Maybe at the end of this conversation, it's decided, you know what, actually, I would, you know, Anthony, I would really love another 2 weeks to improve my performance. Okay, so now the action step is, you know, you're going to do X, Y, Z to improve your performance. And we're going to come back together in 2 weeks to see if that actually changed anything, right? So who's doing what? He's doing X, Y, Z. You're calling him back in for a meeting in 2 weeks. And then you also need to go and tell your supervisor the new plan, and that you're going to follow up with him also in 2 weeks to let him know how all of this went, right? And then establishing accountability. So again, for this workplace situation, the accountability is, if we don't see the improvement in 2 weeks, we're going to go with my plan of moving you to another place, because we don't want to lose you. We think you're a good worker. We just think that you're not in the right area, right?
Yes. Yes.
Okay. So those things are all important for acknowledging the agreement. Again, we can't just leave a conflict at a table because we talked about it and we're like, all right, cool, we're going to move on. There's got to be some accountability. There's got to be some way to ensure follow through on this resolution. Then I got a bonus tip. Just give space for grace, okay? I know we're in a crazy year, but just in general, like I said, people are allowed to make mistakes, okay? Crucial conversations happen when emotions are high. So if emotions get a little out of control and we need to maybe step away from step 5 or 4 and go back to the beginning, we can do that. If maybe we need to table a conversation for a little bit, take a 15-minute break and come back, we can do that. If maybe you're not totally fulfilling your action steps, that's what the accountability is for, right? That's why we're discussing this. So that, okay, hey, you didn't do the dishes again, even though we agreed that we wouldn't let things sit for more than 24 hours. I went ahead and did them because they were bothering me. But I just want to check back in and you know, make sure you're okay, and just ask you to, you know, be mindful of that. Provide space for grace, okay? Provide people the option and the opportunity to maybe not be 100% all the time. So finally, why does this matter? What are the risks of all of this as a leader? The first one is trust, okay? If you're not dealing with conflict and you're just letting people roll over you or do what they want and falling into that, maybe that passive state, I'm not going to trust you to get anything done. If on the flip side, you're being real aggressive, I don't trust you to handle this situation with some discretion, right? Engagement. This is especially crucial for those of you in student organization leadership roles. If your people don't feel like they can trust you, if your people feel like we're constantly having these problems and nothing's being done about it, why am I spending my time here? Why am I spending my time, you know, being so involved with a student organization when just things are constantly not going well, or when conflicts between two people are making it less enjoyable for me, right? Or Anthony at work, you know, maybe one guy's not pulling his weight and everyone notices that nothing's being done about that. Well, I'm not going to be engaged. My productivity is going to go down because Anthony doesn't care about guy A over here, so he shouldn't care about me either. And then finally, support. This really comes down to that integrity piece of doing what you say you're going to do. So when a conflict is brought to your attention, you have a responsibility to do something about it, right? As a leader, maybe as an individual, again, that avoidance can be valuable at times, but as a leader, if something is brought to your attention, things are already affecting people, right? They have a vested interest. And so your vested interest needs to be in helping them come to a conclusion of this. If you don't do that, again, it goes back to that trust that engagement. You're not doing anything when I tell you that this is a problem. I'm not gonna, go to the mat for you when you tell me that there's a problem either. So these are the things that are at risk if we're not managing conflict effectively. So all of this is about getting the engagement you deserve. Leadership is a tool for getting others engaged and involved, okay? Involved at work, involved in your student organization, involved in your relationship, right? Because this isn't just about squabbles in the workplace or student organizations. It's about how you deal with conflict in your personal life as well. So I'm going to circle this back. How do crucial conversations come into play with all of this? How does civil discourse and civility come into place with all of this? And that's a question I want to pose to you all. All of these things impact you as a leader.
Probably makes you better. You know, kind of makes you more understanding as to what people might be going through. Um,
Absolutely.
yeah,
Anybody
maybe, and
else?
then you're on the inside too with your maybe help you with your family and stuff like that as well.
Yeah, that personal life component, Anthony. Absolutely.
Yeah, I was gonna say it also calls you to do self-reflect and kind of put yourself in the other person's position and take yourself out of the, hey, it's being brought to, let me put myself in your shoes type.
Yeah. And identifying needs probably helps for a stronger resolution, like something that will actually work. Absolutely, Bernadette. Yeah, and I love how all of you, you've kind of touched on again those personal reflections, right? Because that really is. I know it wasn't a part of the 5 steps I gave you, and I'll go back to those in case anybody wanted to write anything down. But something that I say a lot in my office as a conduct officer is the only thing we have control of is ourselves. So until you have the ability to reflect and recognize when you're inhibiting, your ability to move forward in whatever conflict you're dealing with, you're not going to be able to help other people do that either. Information is up here. Feel free to reach out if you'd like to discuss any of this further. If you need help maybe processing through a conflict that you're dealing with, I'd be happy to help you. I am not a certified mediator, so I don't want to mislead that, but I'm happy to help you work through whatever you're dealing with. And I just want to close with just a really nice quote. The most important thing in communication is hearing what isn't said. So those emotions, those physical cues of someone being uncomfortable with the situation, those are all going to be just as important as the words that are being used.